Thank you, everyone. It is a privilege to be with all of you on the 169th anniversary of the unjust execution of our beloved Celia.
This was not the first candlelight vigil held in Fulton, Missouri at the Callaway County Courthouse on December 21st, the anniversary of Celia's death. But this one marked a turning point in the modern efforts to achieve some justice for the enslaved woman who killed her owner, Robert Newsom, in 1855.
Friends, family, our prayers have been answered. Last night, Missouri Governor Mike Parson pardoned our beloved Celia.
That's Pamela Westbrooks Hodge, a Celia descendant who has been leading the Justice for Celia Coalition. Celia was a young enslaved woman purchased when she was about 14 by Robert Newsom, a Callaway County widowed farmer with grown children. He raped her the day he bought her and continually for years to come. It was likely that was the reason he bought her. She had already had at least one child by him and was pregnant when on a night in 1855, she'd had enough. She killed him when he came into her cabin and burned his body in her fireplace. She eventually confessed to the murder. That's her ex on the confession. But it seems there was some sympathy for Celia, even among Newsom's own family. And her white attorney, a slave owner himself, argued at the trial that she was justified in defending herself, even though the verdict seemed inevitable. The reports in the newspapers mentioned nothing of Celia's side of the story. She was convicted, she was sentenced to death, and hanged. The details of Celia's story could always be found in the Callaway County Courthouse and the legal documents, but also in the stories passed down through the generations by Celia descendants. There was an article about this case in a small academic journal in 1956, but it didn't really reach a national audience until 1991, with a book by Melton McLaurin, which takes its title from the name of the case, The State of Missouri versus Celia, a Slave.
And I keep telling people that Celia is a heroine of mine.
When the book came out, the late St. Louis civil rights attorney Margaret Bush Wilson was already well aware of the story, ever since she had read the journal article years before.
And I mean, nothing that can happen to me can compare with what this young woman encountered. And somehow that lifts my spirits, and I go right on with whatever the problem is. And I hope to some extent she will become a heroine of many of you.
She commissioned artist Solomon Thurman to create a portrait representing Celia. She invited descendants of Celia and Newsom's children to attend the ceremony.
It's just always been something that my grandmother used to tell us about. No, she didn't dwell on it. It wasn't a constant thing.
Keep in mind, this was the 1990s. It was before the internet, before access to DNA testing. And those have been important factors in making Celia's story what it has become today. Fast forward 30 years to another Celia-focused event.
One of the things that was mind-boggling to me once I learned my heritage and I went out on the internet, Celia's everywhere.
Pamela Westbrooks Hodge, a member of the Missouri State Board of Education, started the Justice for Celia Coalition after her own DNA testing confirmed that she, too, is a descendant of one of the children of Celia and Robert Newsom.
Celia's story of sexual exploitation during enslavement is unfortunately the shared but often unspoken narrative of our enslaved African ancestors in this country. And it is also probably, in my opinion, the biggest mass atrocity committed against women of African descent that we've never talked about, and I'm sure that no one's ever atoned for. And Nancy, I want you to stay standing for just a second.
Nancy Fogle-Campos is now the coalition's lead genealogist, but she admits she was tempted to stop her own family research when she discovered she was a descendant of Newsom and his white wife.
My heart, it almost come right out of my chest, because I had never imagined that at that time that I come from a line that owned slaves. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that it's a positive match.
The coalition has been able to bring the Black and some white descendants of Robert Newsom together to research the story of Celia, now referred to as Celia Newsom. They have gone to Callaway County to visit the site of the Newsom farm. They saw the old family graveyard, although it's not clear if Robert Newsom's remains were buried here, and there is no record of Celia's resting place. They're being helped in all of this by the Kingdom of Callaway Historical Society researchers.
We may be able to find some more family.
And the coalition set out several goals. Celia exhibits in Fulton and St. Louis museums, teaching her story in Missouri schools, a monument to Celia in Fulton, creating a foundation, and they took on the difficult challenge of, one way or another, overturning her conviction. The Callaway County prosecutor was on board and looked at this case and said by today's standards it could be challenged. But he said by 1855 standards, the case against Celia holds up. So the next step was a direct appeal to the governor, and it took a lot of work to put this together. Application for executive clemency for Celia Newsom, enslaved 1836 to 1855. It lays out the history of the case, the legal arguments, and it is filled with letters of support. And not just civil rights and African American history groups, but historical societies, the mayors of Fulton and St. Louis, Silver Dollar City founder Peter Hershen, the League of Women Voters, the Fulton Kiwanis and Rotary Clubs, and others, including 2 state senators, a Black Democrat from St. Louis County, Brian Williams, a white Republican representing Callaway County, Travis Fitzwater.
We live in different political spectrums, but this was something that both of us agree is an important effort, and we were glad to be a part of it. There's more to come. A bill that we filed last year that we hope to get through the legislature will hopefully name a portion of Highway 54 after Celia.
This broad support is not what State Historical Society Executive Director Gary Kramer saw when Celia was becoming a public cause.
19 years ago, a group of us met here on the 150th anniversary of Celia's execution. And as we marched down Court Street, there were protesters with signs protesting our celebration of a Black felon. We've come a long way since then, with the governor now having pardoned Celia. In a real sense, the state of Missouri has now acknowledged the mistake, the error that was made more than almost 170 years ago in the execution of Celia.
Celia descendant Jerome Turner came here from Atlanta to speak at the vigil.
Thank you, Cousin Pam.
Genealogist Nancy Fogel-Campos drove in from Kansas City. Neither knew until they arrived that Celia had been pardoned.
We've been hopeful that one day she would be pardoned for defending herself. It has been a long wait. Because it really was an injustice. I'm glad that so many people are willing to listen to the truth, even though it's not pleasant to hear.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
The work is not over. They have the foundation, educational goals, the Fulton Monument, but now they move forward with this, a pardon, justice for Celia.
But now I see.
Amen, everybody.
Amen.
For Living St. Louis, I'm Jim Kircher.